You know, we've all seen a master teacher at work, right? The kind of person who makes learning look, well, easy, almost like it's magic.
But here's the thing. What if it's not magic? What if that magic could actually be broken down into a science? A kind of blueprint for amazing teaching that any of us could understand and use. Well, there was a researcher named Barak Rosenshine, and he did exactly that. He dedicated his career to bridging the gap between academic research and what actually happens in a real classroom. He boiled down decades of studies into this incredibly powerful framework that basically demystifies what makes great teaching great. So, yeah, let's dive in.
Now, what makes these principles so powerful is that they're not just some guy's opinion. They stand on three solid pillars of evidence. First, cognitive science, so how our brains are actually wired to learn. Second, observations of master teachers, what the absolute best educators were already doing. And third, studies on learning strategies, figuring out what supports really help students. The amazing part? All three of these completely separate fields pointed to the exact same conclusions. That's why this framework is so incredibly solid.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll crack the code on why these principles are so trusted. Then we'll look at the brain's operating system. After that, we'll dive into the four main strands of instruction and consolidation. And we'll wrap up with how you can build your own learning toolkit from all this. Okay, so first up, cracking the teacher code. The real question is, why have these principles resonated so much with educators? Well, it's pretty simple. They're not some flash-in-the-pan fad. They just feel like common sense because they come from real-world, authentic classroom experience. When teachers read them, they see their own best practices reflected back. All right, next section. Before we get into the what of Rosenshine's principles, we've got to understand the why behind them. And to do that, we need to take a quick peek under the hood at our brain's operating system, basically how we're wired to learn. Okay, so the single most important concept we need to get our heads around is working memory. I love the analogy of a small workbench. It's that little bit of mental space where you actively juggle new information. But the key word here is small. It can only hold a few things at once. I mean, try to put too much on it, and everything just falls off. This one limitation is the key to understanding why learning can feel so hard sometimes. And that leads us directly to this idea of cognitive load. Think of it as the total weight of everything you've placed on that mental workbench. If you try to pile on too much new stuff all at once, you hit what's called cognitive overload. And when that happens, learning just stops. Your brain basically throws its hands up. And honestly, you can think of all of Rosenshine's principles as brilliant, elegant ways to manage this cognitive load. And this right here really illustrates the difference between a novice and an expert. Think about it. A novice's mental workbench is totally cluttered. All their brainpower is being used up just trying to remember basic facts. There's no room left for actual problem solving. But an expert, for them, all that basic knowledge is automatic. It's been filed away in long-term memory, which frees up their entire workbench to tackle the really cool, complex challenges. That's the goal of great teaching, to get you from that cluttered workbench to that clear one. So, let's get practical. How do we actually do this? We're moving into the first two strands, which are all about instruction, how you present new information effectively without triggering that cognitive overload we just talked about. The first principle is probably the most intuitive one of all. Present new stuff in small, manageable steps. It's just common sense, right? It's all about respecting that limited working memory. Think about it. You wouldn't try to learn a whole complex dance in one go, no way. You learn the first move, you practice it. Then you learn the second move, practice it. Then you link them together. It's about building knowledge brick by brick, with practice after each brick, so the whole thing doesn't come tumbling down. I love this quote from Tom Sherrington because it perfectly captures the next big idea, providing models. So often, just explaining something isn't enough. We need to actually see it done. This is where things like worked examples, or a teacher thinking out loud as they solve a problem, become absolute gold. It just massively reduces that cognitive load because you're not trying to figure out the process from scratch. You're just following along. Okay, this is a huge one. How do you actually know if anyone's learning anything? The classic, but pretty ineffective way is to ask, any questions?
The problem is that relies on a student knowing what they don't know and then having the confidence to admit it in front of everyone. A much, much more effective way is to ask something like, "So, can you tell me what you understood from that?" The difference is night and day. One is just passive hope. The other forces the student to actually go into their brain, retrieve the information, and explain it back to you. That's how you get real evidence of understanding.
All right, so we've delivered the new info in small chunks, we've modeled it, we've checked for understanding, but we're only halfway there. Because what's the point if everyone forgets it by tomorrow? This is where the next two strands come in, all about consolidation and making sure that knowledge actually sticks for the long haul.
Let's get one thing straight. Forgetting isn't a sign of failure. It's actually a feature of our brains, not a bug. Our brains are efficiency machines. They're designed to ditch information that doesn't seem important or useful. So if we want knowledge to stick, we have to actively fight against that forgetting process. And the best weapon we have is systematic review. A quick review every day, a bigger one every week, and then another one every month. Each review tells your brain, hey, this stuff is important, don't throw it away.
And that review process is crucial for fighting what I think is one of the biggest traps in learning, the illusion of familiarity. We've all been there. You look over your notes, the concepts look familiar, and you think to yourself, yeah, I got this. But here's the catch. Recognizing something is not the same as being able to recall it from memory. And that's exactly why just passively rereading your notes is one of the worst ways to study. You're just tricking yourself into feeling like you know it.
So if we need to practice, how do we know if the practice is actually working? Well, what's fascinating is that the research actually points to a specific number. The sweet spot, the optimal success rate during practice, is about 80%. Think about it. If you're getting 100% right, it's too easy. You're not learning. But if you're getting, say, 50% right, it's too hard, and you're just practicing your mistakes over and over. That 80% mark is the Goldilocks zone of learning. Not too hard, not too easy. It's the zone of productive struggle. And this all comes together in a simple, beautiful path to fluency. I do, we do, you do. It starts with I do it, that's the teacher modeling, showing how it's done. Then you move to we do it, that's the guided practice, working together, getting that feedback, aiming for that 80% success rate. And only after that, when the foundation is solid, do you move to you do it, letting the learner practice independently to build up their speed and confidence until it's second nature.
All right, let's pull all these threads together into our final section, your learning toolkit. We've seen how powerful this stuff is for teachers, but the really cool part is how you can use these principles to help yourself learn absolutely anything more effectively.
Before we finish, there's a really critical piece of advice here from Tom Sherrington. He basically begs us not to turn these principles into some rigid, soul-crushing checklist to judge people with. That's not the point. This isn't a formula to be followed step by step. Think of it more like a compass than a map. It's a flexible framework designed to guide you, to lift you up, not to tie you down. So I want to leave you with this thought. This whole thing, it's not just for teachers in a classroom. This is about learning, period. So think about what you're trying to learn right now. A new language, a musical instrument, some new skill for work. How can you apply this? How can you break it down into small steps? How can you actively check if you really understand it and not just recognize it? How can you build in that regular review to fight against forgetting? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a code for cracking teaching, it's the code for cracking learning itself.